as Muslims, one of the things that we have to remember is to say Alhamdulillah for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But along, there it is. Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, this is in Surah Ibrahim, ayah number 1. Alif Lam Ra. كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور. Right? He's telling us, you could say the purpose of the Quran. Right? كتاب أنزلناه, it is something that we reveal to you, to him, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then إليك, to you, لتخرج الناس, to take the people out from what? من الظلمات, from the different types of darknesses, from all the different types of depression and all the different things that exist, إلى النور, to the light. And the scholars, they explain why does it say ظلمات, okay, and then it says an-nur. ظلمات, because there's many ways to be misguided, right? There's a lot of ways to do shirk. There's a lot of ways to do kufr. But there's only one way to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is Islam. Okay? So that's why nur is mentioned, not anwar. Okay? Nur is mentioned in the singular, mufrad, rather than jam'. So over here, بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ إِلَى صِرَاطِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ, and by the permission of their Lord, to the path of the exalted and the might, the praiseworthy. Okay? And in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O you who have believed, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and let every soul look to what it has put forth for tomorrow." Basically, look at what you are doing for tomorrow, right? For the day of judgment, not just tomorrow. And know that inna Allah khabirun bima ta'malun, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows very, very well what you are doing. Okay? What you are working on. And then the next ayah where he says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, and don't be like those people who forgot Allah. Okay? كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ. Not only did they forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَأَنْسَاهُم, they even forgot أنفُسَهُم, they forgot themselves. So sometimes, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being of these people, but not only do they forget their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't pray, they don't fast, they don't do the good deeds that they're supposed to do, but what happens on top of that is that they forget themselves. How do they forget themselves? Some people working 12, 16 hours a day. No, that would be a pretty good job if you're working 12, 16 hours a week. But some people working just, a few hours. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. You just leave it in the back and show. So some people working and not doing as much work as there's I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So they forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they also forget about their families. They forget about their responsibilities. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. They forget about the things that they're supposed to be doing, right? Even themselves, sometimes they forget. They're so busy at work, they don't even take care of their own bodies. They don't even take care of like personal hygiene and things like that. Yes?
So the people forget themselves because they forget Allah, right?
Yes. And if you're the main message I'm trying to give you right now, if you're away from Allah, meaning you're away from the Quran. Okay? And so if you're away from the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will how they're totally not similar. Okay? And the same way that the person who reads the Quran, there's no similarity to them and the person who doesn't read the Quran and stays away from it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions over here, this is the book, basically, which will differentiate people, right? The Quran itself. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن لجبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if we had sent down this Quran upon a mountain, okay, على جبل لرأيته خاشعا, you would see it totally get destroyed. Okay, the mountain it would just explode. من خشية الله, from you could say the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these examples we present to the people that perhaps they will give some thought to this. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was, you could say, given the strength in order not to be affected by this, okay, and to be able to go through that without this depression and suffering. Now, one of the things that we as Muslims we need to think about is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Taha, He mentions in ayah number 2, right, the second ayah, مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لِتَشْقَى. He mentions that we have not sent the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have not sent this message to you basically, لِتَشْقَى, to make you unhappy or to make you depressed, to make it difficult on you, right? But in the same time, we see the Muslims in the world suffering. We see every part of the world going through so many difficulties, right? And we're going through all these difficulties, and one of the things that we can look at in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 6. No, this is wrong. This is not 61. I don't remember the ayah. وَضُرِبَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الظِّلَّةُ وَالْمَسْكَنَةُ وَبَاءُوا بِغَضَبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَيَقْتُلُونَ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ وَيَقْتُلُونَ النَّبِيِّينَ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ وَذَلِكَ بِمَا عَصَوْا وَكَانُوا يَعْتَدُونَ. So, which ayah number? I know, but which? Yeah. 70 something, I think. It's 70 something, but it's not 61. I put 61 is in الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا. But this is the next page in the middle somewhere. So this ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, this is about the Bani Israel, but He's mentioning what they did wrong. And He says, and so humiliation overshadowed them. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them dhillah. He humiliated them. Okay, and they earned the burden of God's condemnation, basically the ghadab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was extremely upset at them and at the Bani Israel. Why? Because these are the things that they did. So what are the Bani Israel did? And so one of the things you have to remember, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something in the Quran, it is not to those specific people. It is not just for the Bani Israel, but it's a message for all of mankind, because the Quran came for Hudal Linnas, it's for all of mankind, not just the Bani Israel. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what are the reasons why Allah condemns them and humiliated them in the past? And the same thing, if we do these, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do the same to us, because they persisted in denying truth of God's message. Okay, so they kept denying the book that they were given, and we do the same time. Sometimes we do the same exact thing. We deny the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over and over again. Okay, and they slayed the prophets. They would kill the prophets sometimes, or they would slay the message of the prophets. They would not follow the sunnah of the prophets. And the same thing nowadays, we slay the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are things that we should be reflecting and thinking about. Why the situation in the world is like it is? Because of these reasons, right? We don't follow the Quran and we don't follow the Sunnah of our Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, the next thing, when people actually had power, okay, the Muslims had power, you can also see their connection with the Quran. The Sahaba, they would finish the Quran, a lot of them would finish the Quran once a week. So if you guys aren't taking notes, you should be taking notes. Okay? I'm going to share these slides with you, but a lot of the slides don't have the information. They have pictures. So you have to make sure you take notes, inshallah. Okay? So these, what was I saying? Oh, so the Sahaba and the people who were righteous, we see that when they were practicing the Quran, when the majority of the Ummah was practicing the Quran and praying and doing the good deeds that they were supposed to do, and calling to good and forbidding evil, then we see that the Muslims had the largest empire. And this is the Muslim world back then, right? We see the Khilafah and how it raised so much, right? This is within the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, and then how it kept growing and growing until most of the world at that time, okay, most of the known world was Muslim. So these are things that if we think about it and reflect, inshallah, we can change the situation of the Muslims, inshallah, around the world as well. Now, what are we doing wrong? What I want you guys to tell me, what are some of the ways, the wrong ways that people treat the Quran now? Yes. Disrespected how?
They don't hold it properly.
Sometimes they don't hold it. You know, I'm not going to even use the Quran, but like they're walking like this, okay, to the side, right? Or one of our teachers, they said, try to keep it above, even like close to your heart. Okay, so keep it close to you, but or even as much, keep it up. Don't hold it in a disgraceful way, right? What are some other things people do? Yes. Okay, some people keep it open without reading. They'll read it maybe like an hour ago. They'll just leave it open. Yes.
They use it as decoration and don't use it for its sole purpose.
Okay.
Just to guide people.
Jazakumullah khairan. So they use it as a decoration, beautiful Qur'ans. Maybe on the house you have it in different places, but they don't use it for its purpose, right? Yes.
Sometimes people just drop the Quran on the floor and they don't pick it back up, or they just pick it up and all like how you're supposed to kiss it on the floor sometimes.
You don't have to really kiss it, but if you accidentally drop it, you should pick it up and respect it. Okay? You should pick it up right away. You shouldn't leave it like a normal book. Kissing it and putting it on your forehead, this is something that is not really from the Sunnah. But it's good. It's something. No, I'm not saying the kissing, but we should have ta'aleem. We should respect it and have for the Book of Allah. Yes.
When people are reading Quran, sometimes they sit in a disrespectful way, like they have their feet up,
Okay.
or like they're lying down.
Very good. So some people, when they're reciting the Quran, they have their feet out, towards the Qibla, or they're lying down and they're trying to read the Quran, or they're sitting in a very not so good position. Okay, not a very respectful manner. What else? Yes.
People just throw it like that, or
Sometimes when class is done, they put it on the shelf and they just kind of like stuff it in there, throw it almost. Yes. Okay, so it goes back on the bookshelf, right? So after Ramadan's over, or the janazah is over and you've read Quran on them, right? You did basically ruqya on them, then that's it. It's finished, right? Then you wrap it up, especially us Desis, we do this a lot. We put it in the really nice cloth covers and everything, and we put it high in the cabinet out of respect. Okay, we even kiss it a few times maybe, and we put it up there. But like Abdullah said, the main message of the Quran, we're not practicing. It's not nowhere in our lives. We don't even touch it. Yes?
Don't touch it without wudu.
Okay, we don't touch it with wudu. This is a difference among the fuqaha again, but it is preferable you should make wudu before you touch the Quran. Before you read the Quran, you should make wudu, because it makes you think that you're doing something different than usual, right? It's not a normal book anymore. Abdul Karim.
They don't give the Quran the right it deserves.
Okay, like how?
5 rights.
Okay, the 5 rights. Good. We're going to talk about those. Yes.
They don't listen to what it says.
They don't listen. They don't practice what it says. They might even say it in beautiful voices, right? In one of the hadith, it mentions something to that effect. That the people will recite it in very, very beautiful voices, but it doesn't reach their heart at all. Yes. And then
they don't use it for like blessings or something like a wedding.
Very good. So, okay, they see weddings. I don't think the Arabs do this. Imagine this was the Quran. Well, there is a Quran on here, but in the app. But over here, when the bride's coming into the wedding, they have she'll be wearing all like not so appropriate clothing, but they have a mushaf and they're carrying and like right? So these types of things, okay, we're making a'udhu billah a joke out of the Quran. If you go to a doctor, okay, how many of your parents? Oh, you don't have to tell me. If your dad's in the medical profession, and he gives a prescription to someone, okay. And the guy in front of your dad, okay, he takes the prescription and he takes it and he tears it, okay, or he writes it himself. He gets some water and he puts the paper in there, okay, and in front of your dad's a doctor or your mom's a doctor, whoever, right? He puts it in there and he starts drinking it, okay, or he gets the paper, folds it up really nicely, makes a chain, and puts it in. What is your dad going to do? He's going to call the psychiatrist, right? Or he's going to call the mental institution, like this guy, I got a crazy patient over here. I don't know what the heck he's doing.
Oh, but
right?
you mean the prescription where they write on the paper?
Yeah, right? So they put it in the water and they drink it. So I'm not saying that this is wrong for the Quran. Okay? I'm not saying that this is wrong for the Quran to basically recite in water or, have water and if you write the ayat and so. Some scholars say that it's okay to do. Even some of the Sahaba, they are allowed to wear it as a ta'weed basically to protect yourself. Some scholars, some of the minority scholars, some of the majority say you shouldn't do this. But they say if you do it in a respectful way, you put the ayat inside something and you put it as a way to but you're depending on, you're doing tawakkul ala Allah. You're depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you believe that Allah is protecting you, then this is something allowable. However, it's better not to do it. Okay? So if you look at, I'm sorry, 1 minute inshallah. If you look at anyone who does these things, you're going to think he's crazy. Because with the Quran itself, a lot of people use it for this. They drink it and they do all sorts of things when they're sick and they need it, or for exams. But when it's time to practice it, they're the furthest away from it. Sorry, Abdullah had his hand up. Yes, go ahead.
You stated the point previously. Well, if they read it with a nice voice and they don't understand it, because I would like to supplement that with the hadith from Prophet ﷺ when he says, أكثر منافقي أمتي قراءها. Most hypocrites of my ummah are the qurra, who recite the Quran in nice voice. Yeah, subhanallah. And something to really think about and be scared of, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us qaris, but those who practice and protect the real hafiz, the one who protects the Quran in our actions as well. And this next ayah actually talks about this. One second, inshallah, Muhammad. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah as well, He mentions that are you going to practice some of the book and forget other parts of it, basically? You're going to pick and choose what you want to do. And this is what we're doing wrong, right? Some things we want to do, we'd like to do it, we do it. Some things we don't like, we just leave it and we stay away from it. So we have to be very, very always thinking about this and not making sure that we don't do the wrong thing. Muhammad, yes.
What do you mean by drinking the Quran?
Well, what they do is they write it, the Quran, the words of the Quran, and they write it down on, usually they write it with some type of ink, and they write it on a dish or something like this, and then they put water on it, or mix it with the ink, a lot of water, and then they drink it.
Don't usually in the Sahara they write it with saffron.
Yeah, and you know what, Zafran, I was talking about jinn last year. One of the things which was interesting, I came upon a hadith that mentions that angels don't like saffron. And I mentioned that last year in class, I think. That they don't like the smell of saffron, Zafran.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it's mentioned that the Jannah, the soil of the Jannah is made of.
Yes, but for some reason the angels, they don't like the smell. And I was surprised to hear this because this is what the people who fight jinn and things, and sometimes they're doing shirk involved. There's shirk involved. They use saffron to do it. But jinn is another story. We're not going to do that right now. Okay. Next thing. I want you to imagine that, and again, inshallah, you were married or your fiance wrote this. Okay. Not just Abdullah is a big inshallah for that. So this is something, of course, like you receive a love letter from your fiance. Okay, or you're married. Okay, you did the kitaba. You're married, and you get a love letter. Usually, and sometimes you see it in the movies too, right? They're holding it and they're smelling it. They're like before even opening it, right? They're smelling it. Oh my God, my favorite person in the world wrote this, and then they read it. And what do they do again? Do they just read it once? They read it again.
They put it in a $1,000 frame.
They read it over and over again. Why? Because their beloved wrote it. Now, if we are truly ones who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should also read the Quran over and over again. Okay? We should be the ones who recite the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We love the message that, remember, the Quran is the message from Allah to us. In Salah, we talk to Allah. In the Quran, Allah talks to us. Yes? Yeah, go ahead. Turn that on, please. And give me a 5-minute warning when it's time's about to be up, inshallah. Okay? 11:27, I think, class is over. No, is it 11:42 actually? Look at your sheets, please. 27. Okay. So give me a 5-minute warning, inshallah. Okay. Now, we talked about how the Muslims use the Quran. Okay. But we should look at now how we should be using the Quran. What are the responsibilities that Muslims have towards the Quran? Inshallah, we'll talk about those in just a minute. But one, we should use it as guidance. Okay? We should use it for our beliefs, morals, and values. Okay? You guys should be writing these things down. I'm going to be quizzing you on this. Okay? So again, number one, we should be using it for guidance in our lives. Number two, we should be using it for our actions with other people. How we deal with one another, how we shouldn't cheat other people, how we should respect our parents, how we should respect our siblings, how we should, respect the people around us and different people like this. Okay? Yeah. How to deal with other people. Okay? Then we should also be using it as furqan, the thing that differentiates between the right and the wrong. Right? It tells us what is the truth and what is falsehood. This is what the Quran is for. And haqq and batil, basically, right? Another thing it should do is the Quran tells us what will bring us success in this dunya and the akhirah, and what will bring us failure in this dunya and the akhirah. Okay? So it brings us all these different things, and now we're going to talk about 5 rights of the Quran. What are 5 rights of the Quran? The first right that the Quran has upon us, and the first obligation the Muslim owes to the Quran, is to believe in the Quran. Okay? Now there's 2 types of belief. We have iqrar bil lisan. We have saying that we believe. And every Muslim, we say we believe in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? We say amana rasulu bima unzila ilayhi min rabbihi wal mu'minun. Right? We say that we believe in the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is iqrar bil lisan. We say it with our tongues. Okay? Then the second level of belief is tasdeeq bil qalb. That is the real belief in our heart and our actions, that we really believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book. For example, how many of you guys drive? Legally. No, I'm just joking. Okay. Legally? Oh, illegally. Okay, so don't tell people about that. Okay, so well, you shouldn't be driving illegally. You'll probably get your license if they catch you when you're like 30. Okay, so be careful. Yeah, who cares? One joyride's worth, waiting 10 years to drive, right? So anyways, if you see all these signs around us, right? When you're on the road, you see like warnings. While I was in California, I saw a sign, if you cross a red light, the fine is about, I think it was $430 now. Okay? If you cross a red light. And if you litter, it's this much money. And all these different things. They give you different warnings, right? If a person sees the sign, they believe that they can get a ticket. It's possible. But what happens when a cop is right behind you? So you become the best driver, right? The 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock. You're checking your mirrors. Your seatbelts is already fastened, right? Speed limit is under the speed limit. You're going under it now. You're scared, okay? Why? Because now you have certainty the cop's behind you. And in the same way, you have belief. Yeah, we can say we have belief. Yeah, there's a rule about this and so. But when the cop's behind you, basically when you have certainty, then you start practicing every single thing that you do. Second obligation. Who is this? Sheikh Abdul Basit. One of the greatest reciters of our times, right? And beautiful voice. The second obligation that the Quran has on us is that we recite it in the best way possible. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, qum al-layla illa qalila, nisfahu aw inqus minhu qalila, aw zid alayhi wa rattilil Qur'ana tartila. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to stand up in half the night, or a little bit less, or a little bit more, and so on, in the night praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and wa rattilil Qur'ana tartila. And to recite the Quran in tartil, in tajweed, with tajweed mujawwad, to make something beautiful, right? In tartil, to beautify and to recite it in the proper manner. So this is the second obligation, that we learn the rules of tajweed and we recite it in the proper manner. The next rule or obligation that we have on the Quran is that we need to study it. Okay? We need to have an understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. And there's 2 levels that tell us basically of the study. There's tadhakkur and tadabbur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Qamar, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have made the Quran easy for its remembrance. So who will remember? And he asks us, فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, who is going to remember it? Who is going to take a lesson from it? So this tadakkur is the first level. Every single human being on earth can take tadakkur from the Quran. What does that mean? That we can take guidance from the Quran. We can take a little bit of the message from a person who is very illiterate. They can take something from the Quran. They can have enough of guidance from it. And the person who is the most intellectual person on earth, that person also can take benefit from the Quran. That's tadakkur. And then you have the second level, which is tadabbur. Tadabbur is something more for, you could say, people, the scholars, the ones who put effort and time into studying the Quran. And this stage is when it's a very, very deep study of the Quran. I believe it was Imam al-Ghazali, rahmatullah alayh, one of the great scholars of the past, he mentioned in one of the 5 minutes, Jazakumullah khair. He mentions in one of his books that he had 5 different readings of the Quran. I'm not sure 5, but he had one level. He would finish the Quran every week. Okay, he would finish the Quran every week with meaning, of course, understanding. He was, understood the Quran. He was a scholar of the Quran as well. The second reading he would finish once in a month, meaning it was a little bit more intense. Okay, the third reading he finished once a year. Okay, he would finish the entire Quran, the third reading he had in a year. And the fourth reading, he said, I started 30 years ago, but I haven't finished it yet. Okay? Four. So fourth reading, I've started 30 years back, but I still haven't finished it. And he said, I kept getting more and more gems out of the Quran. And this is one person. The scholars, and Imam al-Tabari, he wrote a volume of 30 volumes of tafsir. Tafsir al-Tabari, 30 volumes. Okay? Imagine that. And he spent his whole life studying the Quran. And that is just like a tip of the iceberg. That's nothing. Okay? Compared to how much more things. And the Quran is timeless guidance, basically for all of mankind. The next thing. The Quran is something to be practiced. Okay? The Quran is something to be practiced. Like we know that the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith, when Aisha radiallahu anha was asked about his khuluq, his character, she said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ, that his character was the Quran. Basically, he was a living example of the Quran, the message of the Quran. So we need to, the fourth obligation that we have is that we practice the Quran. Yeah? Implementing the Quran. Okay? And the next thing is da'wah. Okay? Calling people to Islam. Calling the people to Quran itself. So again, we have number 1. I'll repeat it in a minute. But Allah the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in an ayah as well, in a hadith as well, بَلِّغُوا أَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Right? That preach basically, or give even one ayah. If you know one ayah, go and preach it to others. Tell other people about it.
What's the point? To practice da'wah?
Give a da'wah of the Quran, with the Quran. Yes. And the Prophet ﷺ in another hadith, he says, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. Right? That the best of you, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best of you is the one who learns the Quran and allama, teaches it to other people as well. Okay? So they're teaching and learning. They're always doing this with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now story, my wife, when she was studying in college, she had a professor. Okay? And this professor, I have one more slide inshallah after this. My wife's professor, he was an Arabic professor, and he was Lebanese. Okay? In the beginning of his class, he would write an ayah on the board. Okay? And he would explain the beauty of the ayah. And he would talk about from a grammatical perspective, from nahw and sarf, and from all these balagha, he knew stuff. He had a PhD in Arabic literature. So he would teach it, and then he would talk about how great it is and how this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he believes that it's from Allah. Okay, this is an Arabic professor. Then the second thing, he knows how to recite in tajweed. Right, he's Arabic, so he has a perfect makharij. Okay, makharij al-huruf, and also the tajweed and everything. And he was understanding the Quran. He knew what it meant. Okay, and he was teaching the college people, classmates or students about the beauty of the Quran. What's he missing?
Believe in heart.
No. He believed in it. That he was doing.
Teach them how to understand it.
No, he was doing that too. Huh? No, he was doing that too.
Practice.
Practicing it. He was Christian. He wasn't Muslim.
Really?
He wasn't Muslim. And may Allah guide him, inshallah. I don't know. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him. But he was Arab, he was Lebanese.
Was it an Arabic class?
It was an Arabic class. Arabic class. You can't teach Quran in a college. But the point of it is, you need to have all of these in order to be, practicing this. And this last thing over here, we need to put the theory in practice. And I'm going to end this, inshallah, with this actually. Where is my link? Okay.
No.
Okay, so number one, who can tell me?
Believe in it.
Believe in it.
Recite it in the best way.
Recite it in the best way. What else?
Study it.
Study or understand it.
Study or under.
It's right there, right next to it.
No, there isn't.